I'll jump on to one of the ones that was asked of myself. Maybe I can give a go. Well, most of the companies having strategies, I take it, net data center owners and operators, uh, to be net zero in the next decade. What do you think the impact will be in energy consumption by data centers? And I think this is a good question to answer because there's two issues here, in my opinion. There's the consumption and and the origins of the consumption. Because net zero effectively is the effect of the consumption of whatever level to a net zero position, both from the generation, the distribution, to the consumption, and have it more on grid, which is the key thing. So I think the answer to that question is that a net zero position doesn't mean you're using less electricity. It actually, with the growth in data, and the efficiencies and the more proliferation of 1 trillion devices over the next decade, it's a bigger challenge than we can even think about. If things stayed still now, we could then address it, but actually it's growing incrementally at a phenomenal rate that we haven't even seen in the past. Just saw IDC yesterday by way of term of reference. They're saying that by the end of this year, the data that's in the world today, the data in the centers, will represent 7% of the data that will be in the world in 2030, being reflected by 20 billion devices of data capacity generating by the end of this year, early next, 1 trillion devices by the end of the decade. So to answer the question, I think net zero and the energy consumption issue is sort of two separate desires. But what I like, and I'm really like to see, is that most of those net zero from hyperscales, as we call them, and other industries are not just in regard to electricity. They're now starting to extend out and call it scope 1, 2, and 3, which effectively means that they're now driving down into their supply chains, better processes, better procedures of, they won't present a dirty piece of coal, let's say, and offset that against their side of things. They're taking responsibility for that piece of coal, if that's a poor analogy. So I think the two are different, but the desire is that at least when we get to a net zero, then whatever we're doing, whatever that growth might be, is having a neutral effect on the amount of emissions.